In late 1915, a man walked into San Diego's City Hall with an outrageous offer. "Your city's in an awful drought," he said. "I can make it rain, and you only have to pay me if your reservoir fills up." They laughed and called him a crank, but desperation does strange things to people, so they gave him the go-ahead. A month later, people were dead, entire neighborhoods were gone, and San Diego was completely underwater. Was it science, a miracle, or the biggest con in California's history? This is the story of Charles Hatfield, the self-proclaimed Rainmaker, and the mass destruction that followed. Charles Hatfield was born in Fort Scott, Kansas in 1875, but he wasn't destined for an ordinary life. He moved to Southern California as a child and grew up watching the skies, fascinated by weather. As a young man, he sold sewing machines door to door, but in his free time, he was fixated on something far stranger: pluviculture, the science of making rain. The obsession reportedly began in his mother's kitchen. Hatfield noticed that when one pot boiled, steam from a nearby pot seemed to be drawn toward it. To most people, it was nothing, but to Hatfield, it was inspiration. What if he could lure moisture out of the atmosphere and make rain? He dove headfirst into meteorology books, tracked pressure and wind patterns, and experimented with chemicals he believed could coax moisture out of the sky. He landed on a secret formula of over 20 chemicals that he would evaporate into the air from the top of a tower and stimulate rainfall. By 1904, he wasn't calling himself a salesman anymore. He was now the moisture accelerator, offering his services to desperate farmers across the drought-ridden West. That same year, Hatfield got his first real test. Ranchers in La Crescenta, California, just outside of Los Angeles, were in trouble. Their crops were drying up, and rain hadn't come in weeks. After seeing one of Hatfield's newspaper ads, the ranchers agreed to pay him $50 if he could deliver. Hatfield accepted on the spot and got to work building what looked more like a science fair project than a solution to their drought. He dragged materials into the dry foothills and constructed a strange 20-foot wooden tower wrapped in tar paper and topped with metal pans. Into those pans, Hatfield poured his secret chemical mixture. As the sun heated the pans, the compounds began to evaporate. Then, after several days of waiting, it actually rained. Coincidence? Maybe, but the farmers didn't care and gladly paid him $100, double what was agreed upon. Word spread quickly about the weather wizard, and job offers started coming in left and right. From California to the Midwest and even into Canada, he struck deals with landowners, city councils, and ranchers. His terms were simple: if it rains, you pay; if it doesn't, you don't. In 1906, Hatfield traveled to the Yukon. The mining companies in the Klondike region hired him to help provide water for their gold operations. The contract was reportedly worth $10,000, a massive sum at the time. But when no significant rain fell, Hatfield quietly packed up and left. He walked away with just over $1,000, enough to cover his operating expenses. Still, he claimed dozens of successful jobs over the next few years, more than 17 by 1912. The science community remained skeptical, but drought-stricken cities didn't care. By 1915, Charles Hatfield was well known, if not quite respected. And that year, he got his biggest job yet, from the city of San Diego. San Diego was in serious trouble. The region had been suffering through a prolonged drought, threatening crops, businesses, and daily life. Water rationing was in effect, and the city's main reservoirs, Morena and Otay, were dangerously low. Public anxiety was mounting. Newspapers ran dire headlines warning of potential disaster, and city officials were desperate for any solution that might refill the reservoirs. So when Charles Hatfield approached them with a bold offer, they listened. He promised to fill the Morena Reservoir within a year. His price was $10,000, roughly $250,000 today. The city wouldn't owe him a cent unless the reservoir reached capacity. They laughed and called him a crank, but desperation does strange things to people, so they gave him the go-ahead. On December 13th, 1915, they verbally agreed. But before a formal contract could be signed, Hatfield was already headed into the mountains to begin work. In early January 1916, Hatfield set up camp near Morena Dam and built his signature wooden tower. He filled the metal pans with his secret chemical cocktail and waited for the sun to heat it up. For days, nothing happened. Locals laughed at the Rainmaker, joking that he was nothing more than a charlatan. Officials began to distance themselves from the controversial experiment. But then, the sky began to change. Clouds gathered, winds picked up, a light drizzle started to fall, and then quickly turned into a steady downpour. Hatfield had done it. He made it rain. But in doing so, he was also about to unleash a complete catastrophe. At first, people were thrilled. After months of drought, rain was exactly what San Diego needed. Reservoirs were filling back up, farmers were relieved, and the city started to believe Hatfield might actually be the real deal. But then the rain didn't stop. Day after day, it kept coming. By mid-January, it was more than anyone had planned for. Morena Reservoir, once bone dry, was now overflowing. Roads began washing out, and San Diego was now ankle-deep in water. As the San Diego River broke its banks, panic set in. Bridges were swept away, entire neighborhoods were cut off, trains were derailed, and crops were destroyed. And then, the worst thing imaginable happened. On January 27th, the lower Otay Dam gave out under the pressure. A 40-foot wall of water tore through the valley. It demolished everything in its path: houses, farms, livestock. People tried to flee, but many didn't make it. Others were trapped in their homes as water levels rose with terrifying speed. Rescue efforts were impossible as all roads and communication lines were severed. Newspapers report at least 50 deaths, although the real total is unknown today. When the rains finally stopped, more than 30 inches of rain had fallen and San Diego was in shock. Bodies were found amongst the debris miles from their homes, and damage reports in the millions were rolling in. The city looked like a war zone. But amid the chaos, one name kept coming up: Charles Hatfield. Had he really caused the rain? City officials were suddenly very quiet about the deal they made. No one wanted to admit they'd authorized a Rainmaker with no scientific backing, no formal contract, and no real oversight. But here's where things got complicated. Hatfield believed he had succeeded. As far as he was concerned, he delivered exactly what the city asked for: rain. So he came down from the mountain and demanded to be paid the $10,000 they'd promised. But the city didn't see it that way. Their response was blunt: if you made it rain, then you're responsible for all the damage. Hatfield said the damage was not his fault and the city should have taken proper precautions before hiring his services. For years, he fought them in court. His stance never wavered. The city asked for rain and he delivered it. In 1938, the courts ultimately agreed, with both sides. They ruled that there was never a signed contract, so the city did not have to pay, and the disaster was an act of God, so Hatfield was not liable for the damages. San Diego now had to completely rebuild from the ground up. In the weeks after the disaster, rescue and recovery teams worked around the clock, clearing debris and identifying the dead. Trying to restore basic infrastructure took months. Roads had to be rebuilt, entire rail lines had to be relaid. Bridges, homes, farms, and businesses were either destroyed or condemned. At the time, the federal government did not have a formal disaster relief program, so San Diego relied largely on local resources, private aid, and state assistance to rebuild. Some homeowners rebuilt from scratch, others never returned. Charities and churches pitched in. Rail companies fast-tracked reconstruction of key routes to get commerce moving again. The Otay Dam, which had failed catastrophically, was rebuilt in 1918 and is now called Savage Dam. It took years before San Diego fully recovered. So, did Charles Hatfield actually make it rain? Weather records from late December 1915 into January 1916 show a clear pattern. A major storm system was forming over the Pacific and heading towards Southern California. This wasn't just a local rain event, it was part of a massive atmospheric river that soaked not only California, but parts of Arizona and Mexico as well. And San Diego just happened to be directly in its path. And Hatfield? He just happened to be in the right place at the right time to take full advantage of it. Some experts at the time didn't buy his claims. Dr. Charles Marvin, chief of the United States Weather Bureau, flatly stated, "The best way to produce rain is to wait until it is imminent and then predict it and claim the credit, as many fakers have done with the aid of incantations and hocus pocus." He also said, if there was a way to do it, the Weather Bureau would be using it right now. To them, the science was clear. Hatfield didn't cause the rain. He just took credit for a natural disaster that was already on its way. Despite the backlash and legal mess in San Diego, Charles Hatfield's reputation somehow stayed intact. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe people just wanted to believe. Either way, the work kept coming in. In 1922, Italy was facing a brutal drought and record-breaking heat. With few options left, officials turned to the man they'd read about in the American newspapers, the Rainmaker. He was hailed as a hero after a sudden storm with heavy precipitation arrived and broke the extreme heat wave and soaked the countryside. The government reportedly offered him 1 million lire for his secret formula, but Hatfield had already vanished. As science advanced, rainmaking evolved. By the 1940s, cloud seeding entered the mainstream. Cloud seeding works by dispersing substances like silver iodide or dry ice into the clouds, usually from a plane. These particles act as nuclei, helping moisture in the cloud condense into larger droplets. If conditions are right, that condensation leads to rain or snow. Today, cloud seeding is used around the world to boost precipitation, increase snowpack, and even reduce hail damage. Hatfield died in 1958, still insisting he'd made it rain, all while taking his secret formula to the grave. So, was it science, a miracle, or the greatest con in California's history? Looking back, his so-called success seems less like science and more like perfect timing. He had a sharp eye for weather trends, studied rainfall records carefully, and knew when nature was already setting the stage. As former San Diego Mayor John L. Bacon put it, Hatfield wasn't a miracle worker, just a very good weather forecaster. But one thing's certain, when Charles Hatfield promised rain, San Diego got far more than a bargain for. Want to unpack more fascinating history? In the next video, we dig into the truth behind a bizarre photo of Victorian men supposedly sleeping over a rope. Was this really how the poor slept, or is there more to the story? Click here to find out. Thanks for watching. If you like unpacking the past, subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos.